All right, you're now live.
Thank you. I'd like to say good evening to all our visitors, and I would like the meeting to order for tonight's public hearing on the proposed FY22 operating capital. Roll call, please.
Mayor Bennett,
Here.
Vice Mayor Pardon,
Here.
Councilor Holloway,
Here.
Councilor Gore,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Pelham.
Here.
Mayor Bennett, you have 6 present, 1 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Altman, our city manager.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. This evening, your lone topic on the agenda is the public hearing for the FY22 budget. We are not asking for any action this evening. We're just simply asking for the public hearing. We can't act on the budget until 7 days after. Budget adoption has to be at least 7 days after the public hearing. So we're not asking for any action this evening. Schools are actually at the time, this current time, with as we are in a meeting. So Ms. Dr. Hackney is not here this evening, so I'm going to handle the quick overview of the school budget request, which is part of the ultimately the city budget. She will be available on Tuesday, the 18th, for our the work session to answer questions about the school's budget then. And then there's some additional information in your PowerPoint and your information this evening to answer some of the questions that Mrs. Councilor Pelham had asked. And then we'll have more time on the 18th to get into some of those details if y'all want to do that that evening. But tonight's really just to have your public hearing. Again, no actions requested. I'm just going to go through the PowerPoint that we had that we amended. We've been adding to through this budget process for you. So as always, the framework for the budget is we're not trying to be overly aggressive. So we're not talking about any tax rate increases. We're not trying to underfund. We're trying to meet budgetary needs and act in a fiscally responsible manner. We go through a process of assessing where we are and what our needs are, analyzing, reviewing prior budget practices and the trends through departmental. So we typically look back at least 3 years at budget trends and expenditure trends. And then we look at trying to preserve, to make sure we're meeting our revenues or meeting our costs. And then having some flexibility through the budget to handle matters that may come up during the year that were unexpected. And that's where our contingency comes into play. The proposed operational and capital budget for the city is a total of $180,848,289. That's across the 31 funds of our budget, which is inclusive of schools. That represents an increase of $8,821,095, or 5.13% increase over FY21, the current budget year. Our general operating fund budget is $54,328,648, which is an increase of $1,710,971, or a 3.25% increase over FY21. We're looking at, kind of baseline. We start with the baseline of the 2021 budget and work from there. When council approved the tax rate ordinance on Tuesday night, so there are no tax rate increases in the FY22 budget, and there's no draw from the unassigned fund balance to balance our budget this year. Within that framework of our budget, we look to the city, and council agreed. The city absorbed the health insurance increase to the city employees. Again, there's no tax rate increase, no new real big projects, no new debt, no use of fund balance. And our funding proposal at this point in time is consistent with the schools as FY21. Your tax rate structure for the 2021 tax year is $1.13 per hundred of assessed value for real estate, personal property at $3.50 per 100, machinery and tools at $3.05 per 100, and meals tax is 6%. And again, as we talked about, the American Rescue Plan Act, if we wanted to receive those funds, the funds couldn't be used to supplant money by way of intentionally reducing the tax rate, but we could use it to replace lost revenue as a result. And at this point, receiving more and more confirmation that it looks like we will receive both allocations. So we will receive almost $10 million through the American Rescue Plan Act funding. The revenue committee that we have here is made of myself, the assistant city manager, commissioner of revenue, treasurer, real estate assessor, the finance director, and our budget analyst. This the next gives you a snapshot of all of the funds, the proposed revenue funds for across all 31 of our funds here in the city, which is at $180,848,289. It's kind of small, so I apologize. The next gives you a breakdown of the revenue by type. So real estate, public service corporations, personal property, machinery and tools, interest, those dollars as compared to the FY21 budget. You can see the change, the percent change and the change resulting in that additional funding for the general fund of the $1.7 million. Next page provides you some definitions of the revenue terms that are on the previous page. And then we get into our overall expenditure look for the overall budget, breaking it down by those funds that we same fund, 31 funds that we saw on the revenue side, equaling that $180,848,289. Following page is a breakdown of the general fund for the city by department as compared to the FY21 budget. It's really small. Again, my apologies. This gives an analysis of where the increases and decreases are across the departments to get to that $1.7 million. Got a little bit more information on those increases and decreases later in the presentation. So some highlights of the proposed FY22 budget. Again, on behalf of the employees, thank you very much for agreeing to absorb the increase in our healthcare costs this year. When we did that, we did make a slight change in our health insurance plan by changing one of our offerings, which saved us some money in the renewal. The budget takes care of our mandated services, social services, CSA, and et cetera, includes the 5% cost of living raise that was approved by the General Assembly for all the comp board positions. And so we have those for the constitutional offices and the Department of Social Services. Through our budget discussions, we've included the 2.5% cost of living increase for our city employees. And then I've only included 2 full-time positions in here. We've talked about others, and we'll have an opportunity on Tuesday for council to kind of talk about those positions and what y'all would like to do. But just for the purposes of the presentation, I'm pulling back a little bit and being a little bit more conservative on my numbers and those recommendations. So those 2 positions are the conversion of the 2 part-time positions, animal shelter custodian positions in the police department into 1 full-time position, which is a cost to the general fund of $19,373. The water renewal position, which is a lab tech, that's an enterprise fund position, which has no impact on our general fund, but the cost of that position is $68,492. So these are the 2 positions. There's a list of positions that we provided to council in your budget books. 33 requested positions through across departments, totaling over $2 million in cost. So this is the breakdown, the kind of notable changes Mrs. Pelham had asked for by department. So we see the city clerk's budget increasing by $46,000. There's a part-time position that we have there that was assigned to the Office on Youth. It's just temporarily signed here. So there's not thinking that it's going to be a permanent position. We'll move those funds to wherever that position may land. But for now, it's in the clerk's budget, given the assistance that's being provided. And then also, there was additional funding added into the budget with the thought of hiring a clerk and assistant clerk. City Attorney's Office, there's for service contract increases there for the 16,000. In the manager's office, we've got the economic development incentive payment that we had to add in as a result of the action council had taken earlier in the year. Salary and benefit changes. Here we added health insurance to Mr. Bragg's former position. When he was here, he opted out of our health insurance plan. So we've added that benefit back in so the new employee would be there when the new employee arrived. We've added some travel back in. There was a $7,000 increase in our consulting services line item. And then the biggest was the offset by the removal of the Office on Youth from last year's budget. So we're really only a $7,000, almost $7,800 increase in the manager's budget. Human resources, the increase there is due to when we brought in additional new people into the office, the salary and benefit changes there caused the increase when we brought in, as the turnover in that office occurred and brought in new employees. Finance, there's a $309,000, almost $310,000 increase. Those are for the cost of audits. So we have 2 audits that we're trying to get done this year that are included in the budget. A line item, some travel money restored, service contracts again. And then there was a part-time position in real estate that was created during the year as they were out doing their reassessment work. There was no one in the office, so there needed to be someone in the office that could answer calls while they were there, and that person also assists with the Board of Equalization. And then some temporary help in real estate that's been budgeted at $20,000. IT increases in our service contracts, and we provided council with a list of service contracts. A lot of those items are now nested in IT, as we had that discussion in last year's budget, trying to put all of those software packages in one place. So there's service contract increases there, and also some discussion in restoring some of the travel. Development, increases in development, salary and benefit changes at $20,000 because of change in staff. They requested a $10,000 increase in their demolition fund, some restoration of money for travel, $5,000 increase in consulting services costs, and then $12,000 increase in their service contracts. And a lot of that is dealing with their GIS division. Police department, you got $309,000 increase, service contracts, salary and benefits, those positions that were added mid-year last year on the patrol side, those are showing up in this year's budget. So that's the bulk of the increase. Overtime increase. This year we kind of embarked on a little bit more of an aggressive position, having additional officers on the street and out in the community over the weekend. And that's reflective of a desire to try to continue that into the new budget year. And then they've asked for a part-time property and evidence specialist, and that's the $24,000 there to support the part-time person in that office. Fire, we've got increases in their overtime and training costs of $5,000 apiece. Supplies and maintenance at $23,000, almost $24,000. We have part-time help for vehicle maintenance. We had a retirement in our Public Works vehicle maintenance shop. And with that retirement, we didn't have anybody at the time that could handle heavy equipment, particularly our fire apparatus. And in an effort to try to mitigate having to send our apparatus out to a shop outside the city and taking them out of service constantly, we've brought in an individual that we're having part-time right now that can help maintain those vehicles. But as Public Works has actually advertised for 2 of their mechanic positions in the shop, and we're reevaluating one of those positions to see if we can upgrade it to handle heavy equipment, to recruit someone in that can handle fire apparatus, and particularly also look at pump systems, so we can do testing of the pumps in-house as opposed to having to do that out of the house with an additional cost. So as we move forward with that process and if we're successful in securing an individual that has those skills, this money may be moved over into Public Works to help offset that cost. So there's $88,000 increase in fire, an $80,000 increase at Public Works. Again, benefits and salary changes based on new people coming, the retirement of longtime employees and bringing on of new employees, and changes in benefit packages with health insurance. There's a $8,000 increase on their on-call pay, service contracts again, and then increases in supplies and maintenance costs. That most of that is in our buildings and grounds area. Commissioner Revenue's office, there's the funding in all the constitutional offices. You're going to see the salary and benefit increase as a result of that 5% that the state comp board is providing us. So you see that in the commissioner's office, the treasurer's office also. There's also an increase there in the treasurer's office for professional services to help them in their audit efforts, and then a reduction that $2,500 that the treasurer made in her budget. Circuit Court Clerk, again, the comp board 5%, Commonwealth Attorney 5% again in their office on the comp board, and then some increased costs due to the additional attorney position that was added last year that they needed because of the body cam footage requirement. So these are some additional costs that are a result of that position being added in this year's budget. Sheriff's Office, again, comp board funds. Here we have additional funds for court division and for their part-time. Because of COVID and the backlog in cases, they have had to start having cases in the Beacon, hearing cases in the Beacon. And when we do that, that's stretching our resources right now. So the sheriff, as a result of having to do the cases over at the Beacon Theater and man that facility the same way he would man the courthouse, there's a need to assist him with some additional funding for part-time positions to help court, and then also some overtime costs that he's run into this year dealing with the courts, but also just in general out and providing services through the community. When we get back into council chambers, deputies being as part of our meetings there, those types of things. General District Court, there's actually a decrease in funding there as a result of some staff changes. Voter registration had a almost $28,000 increase. Obviously the increase, the biggest was the rent for the new space. That wasn't in last year's budget. That's in this year's budget, which we kind of talked about when we entered into that lease agreement. Some salary changes and benefits, increase in postage as a result of what they went through with the election in the fall, more people doing absentee. So more postage, more office supplies related to that, and then restoration of funding to their travel line item to help with some training. There's an increase in the Crater Academy. So this is where we send police officers for their training as we bring people on staff. So there's a $26,700 increase in the service contract there. A decrease in our non-departmental line item where health insurance reduction because we made the changes and there was less of a burden there, but also the contingency line item. We reduced it back down to the 350 range last year when we went through the budget process, and council reduced budgets but didn't remove it from the budget. We put those funds in contingency. So that's where the bulk of the reduction comes into play. It's just the reduction of the contingency line back down to where we had it before. And then we have a transfer from the general fund to the CIP to support those efforts. The school budget proposal. So I have in the back the sheet that was provided to council at your work session, your joint work session. The revision to that, which is encapsulated here, is there's still the funding for the 5% state salary increase, the $1.9 million. The asterisk there is They're receiving about 1.7 of that from the state. So the local dollars to make that 5% increase work are really about $280,000. Then they have, again, the phase 4 of their class and comp implementation at $600,236. Their special education compliance, this was the increasing of the hours for the 5 special education teachers. That's a $30,000 increase. Adding 2 new special education teachers at $120,000, and then their health insurance increase at $456,940. So the total request for new funding, which is the difference here, is the $60,000 that they talked about for the English teacher during our work session. That's been eliminated because they could use the CARES money for that. So that's the one item that is in here, which has reduced their total new request down to the $3,193,102. Roll that over to the next page. The new state funding, which is the 5%, that $1.7 million. So the additional funding from the city they're looking for is $1,486,201. The total funding request would be the $14,887,464. So here's the proposed budget on the next page. This is what we have in our current budget, which has been consistent with what we funded over the past few years, providing that difference. And then they have suggested, which they suggested in their budget presentation to council, the use of the $1.8 million that they have in surplus that shows up at the end of the FY18 audit. So this is those funds that they need to return to us at the end of the audit, and then we can then reallocate them back to the schools, which we did last year. I believe it was $1.1 million, and we did that reallocation of funds at our July, the first meeting in July. So under their proposal, you would reallocate that $800,000, and then there's about $844,000 short. And I think in their budget they discussed with you in the presentation, they felt at that point in time there would be about $860,000 of savings. And they thought it would actually be more because they were going to cut off purchase orders at that point in time. So they were talking about also allowing them to retain those funds. So that would be that difference according to the proposal that the schools have put out to council. Our capital improvement program, we had over the 5-year period of over $32 million in requests. The current year, there were over $18 million in requests, and we have about less than $1 million to fund those projects. So this is where we had talked a little bit about the 5 to 2.5% raise and pulling some of that transfer that we were making from the general fund over to the CIP. We would pull some of that money back to help make whole the 2.5% raise. And then the shortfall we would have here where we show on the VDOT match side, and it really could be, we could reduce the fire truck payment and put the money back in the VDOT side. But that money would then be replenished through the use of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that we're receiving directly from the feds. Those funds, amongst their uses, one of the uses is to replace lost revenue. And where we saw the bigger hits in our budget have been on the capital side, not necessarily on the operating budget side, but on the capital side of our budget process with just losses in meals, lodging, and sales as people during COVID didn't travel as much, although some of those are picking back up and people weren't eating out as much, particularly in the beginning. So some of those losses in revenue, in addition to the reduction in revenue that we've seen over the past few years from our 295 efforts. So I'm confident that we'll be able to use those dollars to replenish and replace that lost revenue. And that's how we would backfill and make this year's CIP whole. And then we will be preparing a list for consideration for council, and I know that council is going to have some ideas on how to spend those American Rescue Plan Act funds. Department of Treasury released their 151-page interim guidance on the program, so we're all reading through that right now, and we've got to go through their portal to signal our drawdown, to get our drawdown of our first tranche of the money, which will be half of that 5.6 million, and then we'll, we're waiting on guidance from Treasury on how the other 4.37 million, half of that would come to us this year also, how that will be dispensed. We still haven't received a letter confirming that Virginia independent cities will receive both, although VML and Virginia First Cities have both confirmed that we will be receiving both. We haven't received anything official yet, but we're confident that we will be receiving close to $10 million. It's $9.998 million, but we'll be receiving $10 million over the next 2 years, 2 payments, and we will have until December 31st of 2024 to spend those funds. So we have some time to plan on how we want to spend them. One of those items that I can think of off the top of my head would be that's definitively allowed is the expansion of broadband. And as we've already begun to push broadband out in our downtown and into other portions of the community, would provide an opportunity for us to look at that, which could provide a wide benefit to our residents. The last couple of pages I have of my presentation here is just the steps that we've gone through thus far, noting that May 18th, next Tuesday, we've got a budget work session where we'll talk about final touches and comments and questions about the city budget. Dr. Hackney will be available to discuss the school board budget at that meeting, and then looking optimistically that we could have things resolved and be prepared on the 25th to adopt the budget, the city's overall budget, which is inclusive of the school's budget, that evening. And I know Dr. Hackney certainly would, hoping that can happen, given that they're, as she indicated, they'll be starting their balanced calendar this year and need to get contracts out a little bit sooner than they have in the past. So that's all I have this evening for council. I did include in your packet the information that was provided by schools, which was a little bit different than initially provided, but this is what they had on the screen that night during our joint work session. So I wanted to make sure all of council had that information available to you. Council has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Again, we're asking for no action this evening, just to have the public hearing. And then I fully anticipate good live discussion on the 18th regarding the budget and what y'all might like to do with positions. But again, on behalf of the employees here, I do thank you for supporting the health insurance issue and giving us the ability to look at the 2.5% raise for our employees. It certainly will be helpful and a morale booster to do that, particularly when I was uncertain that we'd be able to do it at all. But I do thank council's willingness to consider that and make changes to allow that to happen on behalf of our employees.
Thank you, Mr. Altman. I don't see any hands at this time for comment. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Mr. Altman, did we receive any comments or suggestions from citizens?
No, ma'am, I have not received any phone calls or emails from any citizens regarding the proposed budget.
And just for the constituents' knowledge and their information, how did we solicit this?
So we placed an ad in the paper like we're required to do. We have a sign-up sheet, a sign-in portal on our webpage to provide comments regarding any item that's coming up on a council meeting. We utilize our FOIA list to send out notices and our social media platforms to also send out notices to our community and citizens.
Thank you so much. The public hearing is closed. Okay. At this time, I would ask Counselor Gore, she has her hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Altman. When you was talking about the school's budget, I understand the change that you have listed because they were able to utilize their funding from the COVID-19 response. But are you still following up on the request to see two things? One, where are they finding repeat cost savings each budget cycle? And then the other thing is the idea that you shared about utilizing the 5% of the state's increase prior to using the money that they're asking for us to use for the class and comp.
Yes, ma'am. We've talked about that, and thank you for following up on that. We've talked about that, Dr. Hackney and I, and we're going to be talking again, hopefully tomorrow and then into next week. So I'm hoping that when she comes on Tuesday, they'll have some of that information for council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Motion's been made by Vice Mayor Parton, seconded by Mayor Bennett. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Pardon,
Yes.
Counselor Gore,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Pelham,
Yes.
Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway.
Yes.
Mayor Bennett, you have 6 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. You all have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.